There are many things that are uncertain in this life, but one thing always rings true. At some point, you will fall in love with someone, and more than likely, you'll ultimately have your heart broken. It's just unavoidable. People deal with heartache in different ways. Maybe you'll dwell on the sadness, maybe you'll take the safe route and express it in either a healthy way, such as music or art, or the unhealthy route, substance abuse. Jeff Tweedy chose all three. In 1997, Wilco had 2 albums under its belt and had just finished their tour for their double album Being There. They started work on the album in November 1997 in Spicewood, Texas, at Willie Nelson's music studio. Lead singer and main songwriter Jeff Tweedy was particularly upset at this time because of marital troubles and not being around for his son due to the band's schedule, and the new songs were certainly reflecting it. Some early songs from original sessions ended up being Via Chicago and She's a Jar, the latter of which being about his wife Sue. It was pretty obvious from the get-go that this album was going to let things out and hold nothing back. Heartache and addiction runs pretty deep on this album, as Tweedy was struggling with painkillers, and it gives off a big "you should have left those feelings in the notebook" kind of feel. At the time, he was known to walk around with a copy of Henry Miller's Tropic of Cancer in his pocket for if he ever got stuck on writing lyrics. He also drew from William H. Gass and John Fante. Quote, "I definitely wanted to get better at writing, and those things happened simultaneously with trying to read better. I would write tons of stuff in my head and forget. Some songs on Being There, I don't think I ever wrote any lyrics down. To fight that, I started writing words on paper and making up melodies to go with them. By writing things down and putting more words into my head, it put more words into my mouth when I turned on the tape recorder to sing." During this time is when Billy Bragg contacted the band about the Mermaid Avenue album, and sessions were put on hold. The album would go on to gain the band a Grammy nomination, and when the band got back to work, they chose to redo what they had recorded, and this time to heavily overdub using Pro Tools to contrast the darkness of the new material. Previously, the band had recorded albums live, and this meant that certain members' roles in the band would be diminished. To make matters worse, guitarist Jay Bennett had started playing both bass and drums on the album as well, which brought the involvement of John Sturratt and Ken Coomer to be almost non-existent. Jeff and Jay had also started becoming studio mad scientists, spending long hours there and recording songs almost exclusively by themselves. The list of just instruments played on the album by Jay is staggering. Ken said, quote, "It was a circling of the wagons, and John and I felt left out. It was Jeff and Jay feeding off each other, not just musically, but other vices. There was a bonding going on, and it didn't just involve music. Jeff didn't go into rehab, but he should have, in my opinion. Jay was taking painkillers, antidepressants, and wasn't in much better shape. The band was different. There wasn't really a band, just 2 guys losing their minds in the studio." This helped put a definite rift in the band that would end up coming to a head later on in their career on their next album, Yankee Hotel Foxtrot, and is illustrated really well in the Sam Jones movie, I Am Trying to Break Your Heart. At this time, Warner Brothers was going through some major personnel changes, and Reprise, being a subdivision, was experiencing some of those ripples. Whereas back in the day, Warner was more willing to let artists develop, now they were cutting the fat and more about product and business, so they needed a single to help shop the album. The band agreed to do this on a one-time only basis, based on the label giving them freedom in the past, and remixed I Can't Stand It to make it more marketable, chopping out parts of the bridge and adding bells. The name Summerteeth was chosen as the album name based on the joke, "Some are teeth and some aren't." Don't get it? Give it a minute, you will. I find it a pretty odd choice to title it this. Summerteeth ended up peaking on Billboard at number 78, not enough to top their previous album, and I Can't Stand It failed to gain much of any radio play. Fans of Wilco were also put off on the sound of it, as they were previously part of the alt-country scene, and when one of their heroes abandoned the scene they helped to create, the natives got a little restless. It's an extremely underrated gem, however. Pitchfork writer Neil Lieberman wrote how Wilco, quote, "crafted an album as wonderfully ambiguous and beautifully uncertain as life itself. And he also commented on how Bennett, quote, painted the album in Technicolor, which to me is the best way to quickly sum up Jay's contribution to this album. I personally heard Summerteeth sometime back in the summer or maybe spring of 2008 from a love interest of mine at the time. And when you first fall for someone, there's obviously a huge feeling of euphoria and anything that reminds you of them or is a piece of them. So my introduction to this album was very positive. And when that relationship ended, I'll admit, I was a mess, and I listened to this album a lot because I had enjoyed it so much in the past. But now it had a totally different tone to it, and every song made way more sense. I related to it, which was comforting, and that someone else was there, and it was scary at the same time to me. I guess scary in that things mirrored me, and I knew what that guy was going through, and it felt like I was hearing the album for a second time with a totally new set of ears. I personally blame having these two ways to experience it as heightening my appreciation of it and being able to take the album for what it is. It's really hard to describe, but it's almost like the best day of your life mixed with the worst, all in one album. And I think that if you look at it from that point of view, that it's both beautiful and ugly at the same time, there's no reason not to love it.